Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 135 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today my guest will be Richard Bresler, and I'm having Richard back on the show to talk about his new book, Worth Defending, How Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Saved My Life. And this is a much anticipated book about the history of Jiu-Jitsu in America. As you may know, Richard was Rorion Gracie's first full-time student in the United States and was even his roommate for a time and was with him for many years in the early days. Richard even made it possible for the UFC to go forward by loaning Rorion money to start not only his first academy here, but also to start the UFC. So this is a fun interview. Richard and I have become friends over the years, and it's always good to talk to him. In this interview, he talks about the book and what it was like, kind of the process of writing it and what he hopes to accomplish with it. Some of the early days, including UFC 1, what it was like to get his black belt, and how things are different now than they were back in the day. So I know you're going to enjoy the interview. After the interview, stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And without further ado, let's talk to Richard. All right, I'm happy to be talking with Richard Bresler. So how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good, Marty. How are you?
Very nice, very nice. You know, one of the coolest things about doing this podcast, and I've done it for almost 7 years now, which is hard to believe, is the people I've met through it. And, I met you through this podcast, and we've become friends and get to talk fairly often. So it's one of the things I'm grateful for. Glad that has occurred and our friendship developed through it.
You know, it's also that it's developed, and I'm thankful for it too, obviously. And it's all jiu-jitsu that's brought everybody together.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Without jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't have started the podcast, so for sure.
Without jiu-jitsu, the book wouldn't have been written. All these people wouldn't be talking about the things they're talking about. It's amazing what jiu-jitsu has done for a whole lot of people.
So true. So true. So let's, you mentioned the book. Let's talk about your book. It's a really exciting time for jiu-jitsu and for you because of the new book you wrote. So let's talk about that. So I know you had thought about writing a book for a long time, Richard. So the question is, why now? Why did this happen now? Or why are you doing it now?
Well, one of my former students, who's now a black belt, his name is Chris Gores. And we back when I started teaching him, we called him the sponge because you'd show the guy a move and he would just get it. I was having a conversation with him and he said, he said, Richard, you should really write a book. And I said, yeah, I know. I've been told that a lot. And he goes, Richard, really? You should really write a book. I mean, he was really he just drove it home. where I went like, and he reminded me of the conversation that we had, because I talked with him about 2 weeks ago, and I went, wow, that's right. He did, I recall how much he kind of like, and I said, okay, I got to at least check into this. So I started talking to my students, and, because so many people through previous podcasts that I've had kept saying the same thing. And I went, wow, there's really something in there. And, like maybe I should write this book. And I started talking, because I am not a writer. I'm not a writer at all. I have the gift of gab. I'm a storyteller, I'm a teacher, but put me down in front of a typewriter or a pad and pen and tell me to write about it, and I'll last about 3 minutes before I'll see something else that needs to be done. So, I was talking to one of my students, and she told me that she is a writer, and we got together and she started interviewing me, and we started, actually, no, it was before that. There was another guy that we started, I was talking with him back in the Midwest, and he started interviewing me for this. And then I got together with her, and things kind of went to a certain point with her. And I don't know exactly what happened, but it just, sometimes the relationship between two people, either it flourishes or it gets to a certain point and it doesn't get anywhere. And I felt us kind of getting stale. And then I reached out on Facebook for the title of what the book should be. And Scott saw it, and he said he had some writing experience. So I had a conversation with him, and the next thing you know, we're having a series of interviews, and here we are, fast forward into November, and the book is done.
Yeah, so sometimes it's all about timing, right? You had this idea, you thought about it over the years, and sometimes the stars have to kind of align, I guess, and things have to really fall into place. And that sounds like that's what happened with Scott. You needed a certain person to complete the project where you weren't strong. Like you said, you certainly have the storytelling ability, but when it comes to actual writing, that's not your strength. So you needed someone to do that. It sounds like it was the perfect match, because the book is just amazing. I mean, the way it turned out is phenomenal. I know a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu world are very excited about it. A lot of people have already read it, and a lot of people are ordering it now. So first of all, congratulations for completing it and it being such a wonderful, wonderful work.
Thank you. I mean, it was, Scott is, he had, he says he had some experience. Yeah, he has some experience. He's written a few books, and being a black belt himself, he really saw that the story needed to be told. And so it was just one of those relationships that just happened, and, without some bumps in the road, because, this year was, the whole thing with COVID. My mom fell down and broke her hip. She, I wasn't at home for a couple months. I lost focus. I had to go to Washington, because the priority was to get her healthy. And she moved from California to Washington. So we went there twice. And so it's been there without some bumps in the road, let's say. But Scott, he did a marvelous job. And I really couldn't be more pleased and the people since that, which has only been a week, that out there that really want to see this come to fruition, the support that I've received is overwhelming. It's just been amazing.
That's great, man. It's a really great thing to watch unfold, for sure. So, what about this process of writing the book? What was the most interesting part about that, and was there anything surprising about it? You know, going back, looking over your life, revisiting all those different times, the stories. What was that like for you?
You know, it was one of the things that, you know, when there's a part, I guess it really made me revisit a lot of the insecurities that I had, especially doing jiu-jitsu, that when I would read my own story, I mean, my eyes would tear up like I was reading about somebody else. And I was just like going like when I was outside crying, you know, after that thing that I spoke about in the story about, you know, that this where I didn't think I could get the move, and I'm like, why are you wasting your time with me? And when I would read that, I'm going like, wow, this was 40 years ago, and you know, and there was other parts in there too that when I read about the changes that were coming about in me, it made me get emotional. And those same things, I mean, my buddy Lowell Anderson, you know, he called me up when I was in Washington, and he just was saying, wow, he said, Richard, you know, it's like, basically he said, you know, you're really, it exposed more of me instead of the part that, you know, in other words, right now, all the people that come in contact with me now or through this book, they just see the finished product. You know, like, yes, I'm 6-degree black belt and I've been teaching for whatever, and people, you know me. Of course, now they'll know what got me here after they read the book. But it was surprising. Maybe surprising isn't the word, but it was amazing how just the revealing. I mean, like the conversations that I've had with you, you know about me because I've shared with you, but it's like, for some reason, telling more people, it's where you're revealing yourself.
For sure. You know, I think that's one thing that makes the book as good as it is. It's you were vulnerable enough to talk about those insecurities and all the stuff you've been through, because you've been through a lot. And I've read people's life stories before, or their memoirs, and I felt like I knew more about them, but I didn't know them better. But with this, the person reading it definitely gets to know you better. You really let the walls down and were courageous enough to be vulnerable enough to let people in. And I know just from the book I just recently wrote, and I've heard songwriters talk about this, you know, you put yourself into it, and it is scary to put it out there and to see how it will be received. And I experienced that a little bit because mine isn't even about me, but, you know, it's something I am putting out there. But I can only imagine, you know, exposing your own insecurities and fears and vulnerability, how scary that had to have been. But man, I'm glad you've done it.
Thank you. You know, there's a guy that I listened years ago. I listened to self-improvement audio. I almost dated myself by saying tape, but let's face it, everyone knows how old I am.
Well, you did say typewriter a while ago, so that dated you too.
It was a cassette audio, you know. It was I forgot the name of it, but I know that the guy's name was Gerald Jampolsky, and it was something about, you know, like love but one of the things that he said, you know, like this book is really, you get to intimately see who I am and what I've been through. And one of the things when Gerald Jampolsky breaks down the word intimate or intimacy, it's into me see.
And
awesome. So it's like you're getting a little more of a glimpse of who is Richard. and how everything was, where I came from and where I want to go and what drives me. And, I just feel like maybe this can help somebody, because one of the things that Rorion told me early on, he says, most people, when they come into jujitsu, they're insecure. They got all these things. And, even though there's guys that'll pump iron and look big, everybody's got these. That's the reason a lot of guys have done it, just because they're, they want to be big and they want to look tough and they want to be macho and masculine. And nobody wants to to admit that they have these insecurities, especially when it comes to defending yourself. But let's face it, most of the people, when they start out, or a lot of them, I don't know if most, but a lot of them have a lot of insecurities like that. And you really get a chance to, as a teacher now, I really get a chance to see those. I mean, they become so apparent to me with them not even talking to me. I just recognize the behavior.
That's so true. There's a lot of wisdom in that, because we all have insecurities. And again, that's one of the strengths of the book, because the fact we do all have insecurities, and within jiu-jitsu, in our lives in general, but related to jiu-jitsu for sure. The new person comes in, they don't know how they're going to be received, how they're going to do, how they're going to look, are they going to suck, or, whatever it may be, or the person like myself who's getting older. And we've talked about this before. What exactly does that mean to jiu-jitsu? And you have insecurities around that. And how do you redefine, success so you can stay on the mat long-term and not worry about comparing yourself to others and things like that. Everybody has some kind of insecurity in jiu-jitsu. So,
yeah.
So I want to hear your views on UFC 1. I know that is an unprecedented, crazy time. And I've heard other people talk about that they were there, but you had gone through so much leading up to that. You'd seen how it developed and everything, and finally UFC 1 was about to happen. And I know you had to have confidence in jiu-jitsu, but I'm sure it had to be nerve-wracking and a kind of a scary thing, not knowing exactly what was going to play out. So tell us what it was like being there during that time.
Well, I was cool, calm, and collected. No, I mean, walking, it reminded me of sparring on a Sunday morning back in the early 80s, the kind of intensity that we'd feel, because we have a bunch of young guys. I was probably one of the older ones, but then I was probably 30. But just the testosterone coming off everybody, sparring on a Sunday morning before we'd start to spar. But this was magnified 10 times, because one, I wasn't sparring. Two, I was at a live, no holds barred fight, which was something, like the kumite that we'd imagine, like in movies that we saw with Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever it was, where, like real fights. No one knew. I mean, I kind of knew what to expect. I just didn't see the size of the opponents that came into the academy, because back in the house, or when we had the Gracie Challenge, we didn't see guys like this walking in. We saw some guys that were pretty good fighters, but no one really had the size. So it was definitely something where I had to really contain myself. And you know what? I think we all kind of felt it, not just me, but, looking back and seeing Oleg Gracie, and, we were all had that concern. I mean, after all, the UFC was basically showcased for jiu-jitsu. I mean, there's some people out there that will say that, the whole thing was rigged and the fights were chosen for us to win. But that's not true. I mean, I was there, and but it was still, we still had to win the fights, and we still had to, still had to fight guys like Gerard Gordeau and Ken Shamrock and those guys. I mean, especially you look back and Ken Shamrock, man, that anyone says, oh yeah, we picked that fight. Like, come on.
You wouldn't have picked Ken Shamrock if you wanted easy fights.
Who the hell wants to pick Ken Shamrock to
Seriously.
fight? Just by looking at him. By the way, after party, Ken Shamrock, one of the nicest guys. But anyways, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It had to be surreal because you'd seen, I guess, many versions of it a lot of times as far as the challenger matches. And like you said in the book, it became almost like you could expect to some degree what was going to happen. It was like you had a secret weapon. But with the big event and like you said, seeing the size of people, and you just never know, how something's going to go. And I hate when people talk about or try to say it was planned or leaned in a certain way or whatever, because Ken Shamrock was a big, imposing person, but he had some serious ground skills, pancration and shoot fighting and all that. And even fights with Keith Hackney and Chemo. I mean, always had his hands full on some of those UFCs, and he literally had to go through the storm on a lot of them. But he and Jiu-Jitsu prevailed, but it wasn't like a cakewalk. Now, the first few seemed pretty easy for him, but he definitely got challenged. It wasn't like your people were picking chumps just to showcase Jiu-Jitsu and make it look like it's invincible.
Yeah, and the thing that really sells that, Marty, is when you see all the people since that have learned Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes.
I mean, like, they could say what they want, but all those people can't be wrong. Let's just, Jiu-Jitsu was really not cracked up what it is, but let's learn it anyhow. There's one guy that was an ex, I don't want to mention his name. He was an ex kickboxing champion, probably know his name, because he had a super foot. But I've seen him say stuff like this, saying about how they were done. But that same guy, like I say in the book, when we were doing the seminar the day of the UFC, Kathy Long, I worked with for, I don't know, an hour or two, and she really wanted to learn. This other guy was basically telling me, oh, this wouldn't work because of this, and this wasn't work. And I felt like, and finally I just said, Hixson was standing 10 feet from me. I said, why don't you just ask that guy right there if it would work or not?
Right.
And, he walked away. So it's like going, it's like, fine, tell him, don't come and tell me. And, and then to have him still keep that attitude about that it was fixed. I don't know what you have to do with some people. I know what it was. Maybe he was kicked in the head once too many times.
Maybe it was. You should have told him, just go over and slap him right in the face and then test it. No, but he's one of the only ones, I'm sure not the only ones, but one of the more well-known ones that held his ground over the years, I guess, because he's still whatever. But so many people saw the writing on the wall. Initially, a lot of traditional arts or stand-up arts, you'd hear them say, well, we don't go to the ground. And we just, that wouldn't work because we wouldn't go to the ground. But if they're open-minded at all, it doesn't take long to see that, hey, it's not up to me. And it'd be great if I learned some of this stuff. And to a lot of people's credit, they got out of their comfort zone and started learning jiu-jitsu. So,
yeah. Which, by the way, is so much different than, and of course, this was in the 90s already. So there was a little bit of jiu-jitsu that just wasn't in one place. But the one thing that people kind of were sold on is that of the value of learning jiu-jitsu. You could deny it all you want, but if you really want to deny it, then put it to the test. Or shut your mouth.
Exactly. One of the other things I thought was interesting, or it seemed like a pivotal moment, was the fight with Dan Severn and Royce. It went a lot longer than anybody had seen fights lasting, and Royce was on his back, and it kept going on and on. I remember watching it, and I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is not good for Royce." This is like, God, he's not going to get up. The dude. I mean, how much longer can he go? Because the fights were relatively short before then, and this one kept going on and on. And I remember it shut off, and I had to watch it later. But and that whole big thing. But right after that, because of that, and you talk about in the book, they had to change, how they did it, because they didn't want ever time limits, unrestricted time to ever cause anything like that again. So they started a different focus. The whole thing was supposed to showcase the power of jiu-jitsu. No time limits. Smaller person can wear the person down. Stay safe until they see the time to capitalize. All those things about jiu-jitsu, it was starting to shift at that point to more of an entertainment and what's going to make it more entertaining. And you said in the book that was kind of a pivotal time, and that was the time when Rorion decided we better get out of this.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't want to be part of it, and we were all disappointed with doing that, having time limits, because it just changes things. And now when they, because I think that they could have even gone to a different, first of all, there was rules that started being incorporated, which I guess they had to be, because things in Brazil are a little bit different than they are, or at least they were back then. I don't know what today would be like in Brazil. I'm guessing probably very similar to what it is, what it was back then. But I think they could have even incorporated like a half an hour fight instead of going to like 5 minutes, like a 5-minute round. And even I think Pride had I think it was 1 10-minute round.
Mm-hmm.
And but they could have done something. And but I wasn't privy to a lot of decisions, or any decisions that were being made as far as then, what happened and why we walked away. I just know that and I don't remember why we started losing, the ground, and why financially there was a problem with the organization. But, I just knew that Rorion saw that it was time to sell.
Yeah. Well, not just the time limits. They started, actually standing people up and changing things like that, which changes everything. If as a fighter, and rounds and stuff like that, which if that you just have to weather the storm for a certain amount of time, and you're going to either be stood up or into the round, that's a very different thing that when you get on the ground and there's nobody coming to get you. There's no escape. So you better figure it out, it's a whole different mindset, right?
Yes.
So let's shift gears for a minute, Richard, and you talk about the journey to your black belt, and I don't want to give too much away, but it was an interesting route, and once it finally came, in some ways, when you got yours, it was a little anticlimactic. Those are my words, but in the sense, compared to how a lot of people, the fanfare, get promoted and that kind of thing. But but it was your journey. But later on in 2010, you got a call from Hixson asking you to come out to a belt ceremony, and that was I'm sure that was a special time for you. Tell us what happened there.
Well, Hixson called me because they were having a belt ceremony, and Hixson said, we'd like to know if you'd like to say, it's a special commemorative, I don't know, whatever, whatever lie he told me.
Right.
But just to get me there, if I wouldn't mind saying a few words. And I said, yeah, I'd love to say a few words. So when I went there and sat down for the belt ceremony, finally everybody got through it, and it was like, time. So I think Rorion walked up to the mic. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but they said, or maybe it was one of the kids, and they said, well, all of a sudden Rorion says, well, there was one person that we wanted to, like I said, it was it happens to me, so it's a little bit foggy, and I don't know why, there's not all sorts of YouTube video. After all, it was me. Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I'm kidding. But just when they all of a sudden said, okay, look, we'd like to officially give Richard, the black belt. And even though I was given the black belt by Fabio Santos in 1998, it was the official Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And it was nice to have it when it came, and it was kind of like, well, I've waited a long time for this, but there was just something because it came from the Gracie Academy.
Yeah.
And and it was, what can I say? I mean, anybody who's received a black belt, I mean, you're thankful. You don't think you deserve it, and everything else, every belt I've ever had, except for the white belt.
If you don't think you deserve that one, that might be a problem. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can relate to that. I just got promoted to brown, and it's like I have the imposter syndrome right now. So there's part of me is like, God, what took me so long to get here, and the other part is like, oh my gosh, am I really here? What's all that mean?
Marty, you're a world champion.
Oh yeah. But I keep going back to, I've heard it said that you grow into the belt. So I'm hoping that's, true for me. You get your plant put in a new, bigger container now, and
Yes.
grow into it with those roots. And so that's what I'm hoping.
I've learned more about teaching the more time I'm involved in jiu-jitsu, and more about jiu-jitsu the more time I'm involved with jiu-jitsu. Mm. Most of my focus has been, the last, few years is just helping others to give them the kind of jiu-jitsu that I had learned. And that's, for me, the black belt is, I really take seriously, because I really want to give the students everything that I got and more. So, and it's not about how tough am I. Let's face it. I'm getting old.
Nah.
Well,
we all know that just because someone has a black belt doesn't make them a great teacher. And I admire and respect the fact that you, not only have you always mainly been self-defense oriented, and I think there's kind of a shift back to that in a lot of parts of jiu-jitsu, but also your big mission and what you have loved is being able to break it down and teach and impart that knowledge and pass it on. And that's been where you shine in it, and that's apparent. So great, respect the fact you are a black belt for sure, but being a black belt instructor is a whole different thing.
Yes, definitely.
Any advice to anybody that, is great at doing jiu-jitsu and they feel like maybe they're a decent instructor, but would like to be even better? What advice would you have for them?
Gosh, come out here and learn from me. No,
it's the best way, right?
Really, I think that finding the easiest, most simple way to do something, because I had a conversation, because there's a part in the book where I talk about myself and Lowell. And Lowell is a gifted athlete. And, he wrestled, I think he played football. He was, he was also, when I was in my 40s, he was in his 20s, and, he just was really, he could do things that us mere mortals couldn't do. And, I made a comment to him about, it's great what you can do, but I said, it's hard to duplicate if you're not a gifted athlete. And he kind of, at first, he was a little bit hurt by that. But I never said his technique wasn't good. It's just that he could get away with stuff that I couldn't. So for those, I wish you had a cough button.
I'll work on it.
Anyways, it's for those people who are good practitioners, find an easy technique for the person that you're teaching to do it, because there's a lot of people out there that I take pride in seeing, like, if I can do this, then most people should be able to do it. And let's take the word should out of there. Put it this way: if I can do it, anyone can do it, because I really want to make it simple.
I love it.
And find the easiest way to do it. And that's what they have to focus on.
Awesome. So, Richard, a lot of people know more about you from the book, or will know more about you from the book, but what's something that comes to mind that may not be common knowledge, or maybe a lot of people would be surprised to know about you?
I don't really know. Maybe that I'm as sensitive as I am, and I use sarcasm to kind of keep people at a certain distance. But like I said, when I was reading the stuff about myself, that it brought tears to my eyes, and I always thought sensitivity was in a man, because hell, men don't cry, or big boys don't cry. So just to have something that was a gift that I thought was a curse, because sensitivity has also helped me tremendously as a teacher.
Yes, I would definitely agree to that. And in your body work and other things that you do as well, for sure. It's a great trait to have.
Yeah, to be, sensitivity, in life is a good thing to have. And back when I grew up, and we didn't understand it, or I didn't understand it, and I just thought, like, oh gosh, this is a curse.
Yeah.
And it's not.
People will, years ago, and some still today, but not near as many, see sensitivity as a weakness. But in reality, being sensitive and being courageous enough to show, your sensitivity and your vulnerability, it takes a lot more strength than the other.
Absolutely.
So I know you've talked about some of the influences, and some of them are obvious: Hixson, Rorion, various people, Fabio. Who are some of the people maybe that aren't as big or well known that come to mind as part of the biggest influences on your life, or had significant impacts on your life?
I don't. People that the biggest influences have been the guys that I've learned from. Which are Rorion, Hixson. I was going to say, Pedro Sauer, but I think the guy's known a little bit. But I mean, Pedro, even though I really never formally learned from him, I've been to a few of his seminars and spoken with him. And he really has, not only was he, a fighter, but really he's taken teaching, to a really, I love the way that he teaches, and I think he's influenced a tremendous amount of people, including myself.
I agree completely. I used to, before I really got to know him or got to spend any time around him, wondered what all the fuss was, which is very naive. Like, what's so great about Pedro Sauer? But it didn't take long at all. Once you're around him, you just like, he exudes not only class, but a knowledge and a sensitivity and the ability to connect with you, but also just impart knowledge on a whole different level. So yeah, phenomenal.
Right. And one of the things that where I first really kind of admired Pedro was back in oh gosh, it was the UFC before Oleg Taktorov fought. I don't think his first fight was with Henzo because that came a little later.
Right.
But Oleg came to the academy, because we still own the UFC. So Oleg came to the academy because they wanted to see, they wanted to meet him to see if he was worthy of fighting. So Pedro happened to be there, and I'm teaching a class, and Rorion's there, Pedro's there, and I'm teaching, and all of a sudden Rorion comes in and grabs Pedro and says, "Hey, let's go to the back room here. I want to see if Oleg has anything worth, And I'm like getting ready to walk there, and Rorion says, "Richard, you got to teach." And I'm like, oh, And so Pedro comes back, I don't know, 10 minutes later or something. And I said, so? And he said, he's okay. He doesn't really, have anything technical, super technical, and I just remember that going, yeah, I mean, obviously Pedro kind of had his number, but just to kind of see that, I'm yeah, no big deal.
That's so cool.
Well, because the guys that I've met in the past, the judo players, although wrestlers probably were some of the toughest, but the judo and the other, mostly I guess judo, and I didn't really have much with he was
Sambo.
Sambo, yeah. The Sambo was pretty decent, but they didn't have the refinements that Jiu-Jitsu had. And I think that's what we saw with why Pedro had that, because we had something that was just a touch better than, more than a touch better than those other arts. I know the haters are going to come in and start,
yeah,
judo's this, and yes, they're all great.
They're all
but
great, yes.
Yeah, I mean, put it this way: when I tell the story about especially back in the early 80s, when we went to the LA Judo Club because John Saxon was, I think, a brown belt in judo, and he told Rorion about it. And when I saw Rorion, go on the mat with all these guys and go through them while he was looking at me, and he would like mouth out like, "I'm going to choke him and I'm going to give him an arm lock," and then he would do it, and I'm like, "What the hell? How can he?" Because these guys were supposedly supposed to know the same thing, and not only when he was doing it, he would do that. He would be looking around the room for the toughest guy. So, I experienced it. So I know that the guys that do judo now, when they talk about it, yes, maybe now because they've incorporated jiu-jitsu techniques.
Right. Man, it's so cool that you got to see all that. I went to some early Hixson seminars. Some of them were like a whole week, which is cool. And then I also seen a lot of video of the same thing. But, and he and all the family members did this, and you were just describing Rorion doing this, but just being able to go through the whole room and not even breaking a sweat, not even breathing heavy, you're smiling, gesturing over to someone, what they're going to do. Hixson used to say, I'm going to catch an arm bar on your left arm in 30 seconds, start counting it down, right? I'm sure you've seen something like that. It's just crazy, amazing. But that's how a whole different level jiu-jitsu was on back in the day before other people started learning it. And a lot of these that were in the room, in the seminars were martial artists, and some of them had even had some ground fighting, some judo or various things, but it was just that much of a divide until people started learning, it. So yeah, amazing that you got to see a bunch of that.
Oh yeah, it was just and I got to experience it. I mean, I remember sparring with him, with either Hixson or Rorion. I'm going to catch you in a foot lock, and it's going to be the left foot, and it's going to happen in 23 seconds. And I'm like, yeah. And then you do.
Are you thinking that's all I got to defend from? I just got to make sure
right.
he doesn't do that. It still doesn't work.
Yeah,
That's got to be crazy.
Yeah, it was. And that's the difference between what people experience now. Because first of all, back then, and I think Chris Howder said it in the documentary Roll, we had a superpower. Once you hit purple belt back then, early on, I mean, it's just like you arrived, and it's still, once you hit purple belt, it's still like you really could, like, okay, I'm really understanding and I know how to defend myself, but it's so totally different. I mean, just because we don't have a superpower anymore, or put it this way, we do, but there's a whole lot of people who have the same superpower.
Sure. Oh, well, that's what makes it so great that you were a part of that whole era back then. And I remember when I was just referring to the early days with the Hixson seminars, I remember if someone was a blue belt, under him, it was like, I remember going to seminars and looking at his information, and there was someone like in Tennessee, and then there's someone 5 states away that are blue, and those are the highest ones, in this association. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're blue belts. And it's just such a different kind of time now, because now people say, oh, blue belt, pretty low on the totem pole in the grand scheme of things. But at the time, I remember thinking, wow, blue belt. So like you're saying, blue or even purple was like a whole nother universe for back then.
Yeah, definitely. And the one thing is when I went to Brazil in 1981, I think I don't know if I told people this in the book, but I went for a walk one evening in the streets of Brazil, and I happened to have a bodyguard with me, because you never knew what was going to happen in Brazil in the evening, walking, with somebody. And the bodyguard's name was Hixson Gracie.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's exactly the way I felt. Hixson and I, he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Portuguese, but we went to the store because, I was over at their house with his wife, and she spoke English. And so we went down to the store. I think we jumped on a bus and we went walking the streets. And I just went like, oh my God, like I could be, like, I wasn't even worried, because I went like, man, no one's going to mess with me. Here's like a 19-year-old Hixson Gracie,
wow.
like so, and just exuded confidence. And before, if I was alone in the evening in a place like Brazil, I'd be a little concerned, but it was like without a care when walking down the street. It's like, yeah, you're not going to mess with me. Hixson Gracie's by my side.
That is cool. I can totally visualize that. And if your book ever gets turned into a movie, which would be pretty awesome, you got to have that scene in it, because what's so cool about it is not only that he's Hixson Gracie, but you didn't speak Portuguese, he didn't speak English, but you didn't have to. It was just a cool situation. You know what I mean? Very cool.
Yeah. Especially because we would kind of like, you're thinking all these good thoughts and all the, good vibes. And then you go to, I remember I went to say something, and I even said to him, I go, you don't understand me. and he probably was doing the same thing. We kind of look at each other, smile, and, and kind of, obviously it wasn't for like a 2-hour walk. We just went to the store, but still just the vibe.
That's very cool. The vibe. All right, my friend. So what's next for Richard Bresler? What would you like to see happen going forward in your life right now?
Well, I'd like to really see as many people out there get this book. And it's not so much because I want to sell the book, as much as I really want the people who are coming into jiu-jitsu now that basically kind of take it for granted the way they take cell phones for granted. When I was a kid, dude, we had these little things with dials on them with a cord, and you had maybe one or two in the house, and you had to stand next to it while you talked, and no answering machines, so it's the same way with jiu-jitsu. Back when I learned jiu-jitsu, basically it was one person, and now we have everybody to learn from, and it was only 41 years ago when the whole thing started. I'd like people to be aware of this is such a new thing in the US, and also remember why they're doing it. It's not to become a world champion, although, like I said, I don't have a problem with that, but it's there to help you learn to defend yourself.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to be able to, raise that awareness and have as many people know about it as possible, so the history doesn't get lost.
Well, I've no doubt you're going to do that on a very high level, Richard. And anybody listening, Richard's certainly open to being brought in for seminars, I'm sure, right, Richard?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's spread the word about this fantastic book, which tells the story of the early days and the start of jiu-jitsu in the States, and what a big part that you played in that. So I urge anybody listening to certainly get a copy of the book, get a second copy to give as a gift, and if you know anybody that might want to bring Richard in for a seminar, certainly reach out. All right, my friend. Well, it's been absolute pleasure, as usual, to talk with you, and I appreciate your time. And I got to get it in now, so when you blow up and become so popular, I won't be able to talk to you that often, I'm sure. Because
there's also, I have scheduled in the next month, I have 5 podcasts that I'm going to be doing, but because we're the kind of friends that we are, I told you, that you would be the first, just because of, of all the other guys that I'm talking to. You and I have really, developed a relationship. We speak to each other pretty frequently, and, and consider, I consider you a friend, and I've also had been fortunate enough to meet you when you came out to California, and I really want to thank you very much for doing the podcast and getting this word out there.
Absolutely, my pleasure, my friend. And I want to see all the success and recognition that you deserve. I think Scott and I said it on the recent episode that you're kind of an unsung hero. You've always been a hero, but it hadn't been out there enough. So I'm glad that people are finally going to get to know about you on a larger scale, and you get kind of some of the respect that you've deserved for so long. So props to you, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, Marty.
Long, healthy life, and we'll talk soon, brother.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.
All right. Really enjoyed that conversation with Richard. Always a pleasure to speak with him. Make sure you check out his book that's available now on Amazon, and I'll have a link in the show notes. And for those of you who don't know, my book, See You on the Mat, is also available currently on Amazon. All right, up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment.
Until you have had the taste of finishing, you will not respect yourself. Until you follow through, until something is done, tears and struggles and pain, and you go through it anyway, and you show up and you continue to fight on no matter the circumstances. After a while, something begins to wither inside of you. Every champion has felt it. Every president has felt it. Every king has felt it. Every lion has felt it. Every winner has felt it. Every soldier has felt it. Every victorious person has felt it. The urge to quit. Don't you give up on your dream. I don't care if you don't have the money, you don't have the help, and you don't have the family for it, and you don't have the background for it, and you don't have the friends for it. Don't you give up on your dream. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. It may take you twice as long. You may have to take courses and classes. You might not read as fast. You might not move as quick. You might not have as much. But don't you quit. Don't you quit. Don't you quit. You do make a difference. You do make a difference. You do make a difference. As weak as you are, as tired as you are, as many mistakes as you made, you do make a difference. There is something they would lose if you were not there. There was something that they would miss if you were not there. You do make a difference. You do make a difference. I would rather aim for the stars and not hit them than to not aim at all. I would rather go after it and not get it than not go after it at all. I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. I don't want to live with the idea, wonder what would have happened had I done more with my life. I'm going to go for it come hell or high water. I'm going after my destiny. I lost a lot of stuff. I lost a lot of friends. I lost a lot of strength. I lost a lot of courage. I lost a lot of time. I lost a lot of money, but I was still believing. Broke, I was believing. Lonely, I was believing. Betrayed, I was believing.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GJJRs.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.